Welcome to the Atomic Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Osborn. And on this podcast, we interview successful business owners for them to share atomic, impactful lessons that they've learned throughout the course of their business and share them with us so we can all learn together. As always, this show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way that established businesses are creating a reliable acquisition channel conversations with their ideal prospects. We use this method to book 26 qualified leads and sales calls in 10 days without any ad spend, outreach, endless social media posting, or any of the old, ineffective traditional marketing methods that everybody hates. To find out more, message me on LinkedIn. The link to that will be in the show notes below. But on today's show, our special guest is Billy Moyer. He's the owner of SOS Leadership, where he provides consulting, fractional executive work, and coaching. So, Billy, thanks so much for being on the show today. And I want to start off by asking you a question that I always love to start with, which is this. If you were somehow able to go back in time to when you started your first business, but knowing what you know now, what would you do differently in the first 12 months?
Wow, that's a great question. Now, I started my first business, which was SOS Leadership, when I was 21 years old. So um, I was in my last semester of college. I started my business with my dad, who's kind of been my mentor. And
Wow.
when I think back, gosh, 21, what I know now at 40, there's just a million things that come to my mind. I think the biggest thing would be that I'd really have a conversation. If I could go back in time, it'd actually be to have a conversation with myself and remind myself that I don't have to do it all and
Mm.
be the most successful person in the world within that first 12 months. I was really kind of hard on myself when I first started my business because I wanted to kind of hit a home run, knock it out of the park. And I feel like there was some pressure there starting it with my dad, although he didn't put that pressure on me. I was getting into a line of work that I'd been around my whole life. I'd been working in some way, basically my whole life. And I wanted to sign my first client in the first week. I wanted to have all of this success. And I think I put so much pressure on myself that um, I really didn't have give myself enough time to just enjoy the ride. And I
Mm.
just turned 40, and I actually wrote these LinkedIn posts messages to my younger self. So I wrote a letter to myself at 10 and a letter to myself at 20. So 20 is close to when I started this
Yeah.
business. And thinking back to how I was between the age of 20 and 30, I just didn't take enough time to pause and enjoy the ride and really give myself the grace to say, hey, you don't have to do it all right now. You have plenty of time.
Yeah. And it's really interesting what you're saying with that because I've been doing some reflecting on just business and chatting to people and things. And it's really interesting what you're saying because it's almost been 20 years since you've launched your business. And I think there's a lot to say about that because you may have heard this phrase before, Billy, but I love this saying. It says, we often overestimate what we can get done in a year, but underestimate what we can get in 10. And I think, getting up to that point in your business of 20 years, the foundation, the all of the work that's gone into that, I think is just incredible to get to where you are today. And it's very, I think, inspiring for people to look back and go, okay, yeah, I've only been in business for a year or 3 years or 5 years, whatever they're in business for, and learn from people like yourself that have been in it for so long. I'm just going, yeah, you just got to stick with it. There's ups and downs, and we'll talk about some challenges here in a second. But I just love that, man. I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's been a
Yeah,
fun
that's
ride.
yeah, I'd say so. What got you started? Just curious about this. What got you started doing it with your dad?
Yeah, so I've got a bit of a unique story, had kind of an interesting childhood. So my dad has been in kind of the leadership development space for 45 years. And
Yeah.
I'm the fourth of four kids, the youngest by 7 years. So I was essentially almost an only child growing up. And I went through my first goal setting program when I was 4 years old. Wrote down that I wanted to be just like my dad. A couple of years later, I kind of clarified that and said I wanted to become a speaker and get paid money like him. That's what I thought he did, which was a part of what he did. And I actually accomplished that goal when I was 7 years old, got paid to speak to my first group. And from the ages of 7 to starting my business at 21, I probably gave almost 1,000 presentations all over the
Wow.
world on leadership and goal setting and self-confidence, self-image. And so, really, what got me started was kind of that saying of people become like their leader. I wanted to be just like my dad. And when I started the actual business at 21, he was kind of thinking about what was next for him. So he kind of retired to teach me kind of how to do this kind of a business. And he said he'd give me 3 years, and that was 18, 19 years ago. And he's still actually working with me now.
Wow. That's cool though, man. That's really, really cool. That's amazing. Well, yeah, I'd be interested to hear you answering this because I think it might be a little bit different from a lot of people who don't have the guidance of someone like your dad that has the expertise and experience in it. But what are some of the things that you've done to grow the business? Because I know obviously you, even though you work with dad, I'm sure you would still want to be you. You know, you don't want to just be, the son of. You want to be yourself. So what have you done to help just grow the business?
Yeah. So I think the key for us has just been to constantly kind of reinvent ourselves and our business. And so it was a great thing that I learned from my dad, and I tried to build a business with him. But the types of businesses that he knew how to build were different than where the market was in
Mm,
2008 and then 2010 and 15 and so on. So
yeah.
I also have this kind of, I'll say, blessing and a curse just about my way of doing things. I am very much someone that likes change. I know a lot of people hate change. I like constant change, and I get bored really easily. So in some ways, I reinvent my business because it keeps me excited and interested. But the other reason I do that is because so much changes in our world. And when we started this business, we were doing traditional training and development with, programs that were both written and
Mm,
recorded, kind of using spaced repetition, kind of that old model invented by Paul J. Meyer, who's kind of the founder of the
mm,
personal development industry. That was my dad's
yeah.
mentor, mine as
Oh,
well.
cool.
And so we started doing that, and pretty quickly I was like, this is great stuff, but this isn't, one, the type of business that I want, and two, I don't think this business works anymore. And the more,
Mm,
technology came into play, you can find great content for free anywhere. So we have constantly changed our business, kind of the fractional executive work that we do now. We were pretty early in that space. What we realized was pretty early on, all right, we love helping leaders grow, but most of our
mhm,
clients are these small business owners who
yeah.
have a million challenges. So we looked and said, rather than trying to just coach them on how to be a better leader, let's build a business around filling in the gaps that they have in their leadership, but in their business, knowing that these are great business owners that are great at whatever these businesses do, but they don't know it all, just like we don't
Mm,
know it all. And so we
mm,
kind of looked and said, what if we just became part of their executive team and helped them grow? And, that's turned into a lot of different things. We were a fractional chief people officer before I think anybody was really calling it that.
yeah.
And yeah, so constantly reinventing yourself, and doesn't mean, you just change for change's sake, but getting ahead of the market is so important, but also understanding yourself and knowing that sometimes change can keep you motivated. And that's something that I know really about myself.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's great. I'm sure you teach a lot about this, but just being self-aware enough to know that as well. Um, as opposed to just reading a book and going, okay, well, the book or this person said do it that way. It's like there's nuances in certain things as well. Really interesting. You're talking about that evolution of change. One of the things I like to ask on this show is around the challenges we have in business because we all have them. I always say sometimes we can feel like we're the only ones that have ever had that problem, which isn't true, but it can feel that way sometimes. It can be a lonely space at other times. But having said that, Billy, what's the number one biggest challenge that you've faced so far in your business? And what's the lesson that you learned from that?
Yeah, I think I think the biggest lesson was really just around the people and relationships that go into building a great business. And get started this business with my dad, had this idea of growing it to become, this huge thing. And I wanted to include all the people that were most important around me, because I, have a great siblings that are really impressive, I had great friends. And so I started the business and quickly tried to make it more than it was. And I hired my best friend, I hired my sibling, and those decisions were interesting. And they were experiences that had really great highs, but also some challenging lows. And
Mm,
what I learned from that wasn't, hey, don't go out and hire your best friend or your sibling. What I learned is what you mentioned earlier, self awareness.
mm,
I learned that those situations didn't end up working out, not because of them. They didn't work out because I wasn't self aware enough. I didn't understand um, my own shadow side of my leadership, where I show up with ego and fear and try to kind of disconnect from those around me. So
mm.
I really have learned that the biggest challenge in the growth of my business is also the biggest challenge in the growth of me. And that's the shadow side of my leadership, what shows up when I'm tired and stressed out, that worst version of myself. So I have
Yeah.
become far more self-aware over the years, and I really use that to my advantage. And I have no problem pointing out the flaws that I have, but I'll just don't just point them out. I try to work on them constantly.
Yeah. I love that. I've never heard that phrase before, the shadow side of leadership, but I totally understand what you mean by it. Because and again, there's a lot of self-awareness that I think people need to have around that, and just realize I got issues with certain things. There's things I need to work on, and I think some people as leaders try to hide that because they have to portray themselves to be a certain thing. But when we actually just go, look, I'm not good at this, or this happens and it causes me to, I don't know, whatever it causes you to do, then it allows you to actually learn and grow. So I love that perspective. And we don't have much time left, but could you just talk about maybe one thing around that shadow leadership, and maybe something that would be able to help everybody out? Because I can tell it sounds like something you enjoy talking about.
Yeah, I actually wrote a book earlier this year called The Upside Down Leader, and it really is about the shadow side of our leadership. But rather than pointing out other people's shadow, it's really just one kind of exploration of my own shadow. And so the reality is, as leaders, we all have kind of the mission, who we want to be, how we want to act. We talk a lot about that, but what we don't talk a lot about is that other side, the shadow side, and that is this understanding that most leaders don't fail because of lack of skill. They drift because of ego, fear, disconnection. They slowly turn from leadership in daylight to kind of leadership in what I call the upside down, and often without them noticing. And self-awareness really is the foundation to getting out of that, because you can't really lead others well if you can't see yourself clearly. And the
Yeah.
reality is, most leaders have never given themselves kind of an honest mirror. I think we have to continuously look in the mirror to understand how we're showing up in the moment. And if we can get right side up, kind of that opposite of upside down, that's where we're leading with purpose instead of
Mm,
ego,
yeah.
clarity instead of fear, and connection instead of isolation. So, really, it's about putting people first. But leadership is, yes, about people and it's about influencing others. But all leadership has to start with yourself, self
Yeah.
leadership. Because if you can't lead yourself, how are you going to lead anyone else?
Yeah, I love it. Love it. Oh, that's so incredible. Well, over the next, say, 2 to 3 years, Billy, what's the goal? What would you like to achieve?
Yeah, so my business is in a great spot. SOS Leadership. I've started a bunch of businesses over the years besides that one, and right now, uh, in just writing the book, The Upside Down Leader, what I've kind of realized is I love helping businesses, and SOS Leadership will continue to do that. But my role really is with the key executives and with leaders in general. So the next 2 or 3 years really are really about me leaning into helping leaders individually grow to the next level, identify and own that shadow, so they
Mm,
can lead better at work, but also lead better at home. I'm really passionate about really great fathers and husbands,
yeah.
wives and mothers. So really helping people just become that best version of themselves. And ultimately, I think leadership can change the world. And we see that in our world right now, the biggest problem we have is leadership. And so, how do
Mm,
we solve it? Better leadership.
mm. Yeah. Love it, man. Absolutely love it. And I love what you say, right? Resonating around being fathers and stuff like that. That's a big thing for me as well. So that's fantastic, Billy. Well, for people that are looking to get in touch with you and learn a little bit more about how you can help them, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, they can find me at daylightleadership.com. That's where the book is. I also have a podcast called the Upside Down Leader Podcast. Also, it's always easy to find me on LinkedIn, Billy Moyer. I pretty much pop up right there at the top if you search for me. And I'd love to connect with anybody. I love great conversations. Not always looking just to sell a book. In fact, I usually just give my books away. Again, my calling is to help people grow.
Amazing. Well, I definitely recommend everyone to check out Billy on the different places that he recommended there. Because just from hearing what he said, I'm sure you can see how much he can help you out in so many different ways. So, Billy, thank you so much for being on the show today and just sharing your wisdom experience with your business and what you've learned from that. I really appreciate you taking the time out today. And as a reminder for everyone listening, this show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way that established businesses are creating a reliable acquisition channel of conversations with their ideal prospects that doesn't rely on any of the old, ineffective traditional marketing methods that everybody hates. To find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn to have a chat. That's Jason A. Osborn. The link to that will be in the show notes below. And until next episode, stay inspired.